which was a significant incident, I think, as far as the marine world was concerned. So we're going to talk about the initial spill. We're going to talk then hear a very useful presentation from Polyeco on the cleanup. And we're also going to discuss a little bit about its impact, and it will probably serve to bring you up to date with the incident as at now. So the UK and Ireland Spill Association is the trade body in the United Kingdom for marine and inland spill response companies. It represents contractors, manufacturers, and consultants. It also runs accreditation activities under its own scheme for inland oil and chemical spills, and delivers the Maritime and Coast Guard Agency scheme for the accreditation of marine spill response organisations through its independent accreditation body, International Spill Accreditation Scheme. Now, this webinar and all the webinars we do, it's not about a trade association saying what went right, what went wrong with an incident. It's too early for that, as the investigations into this one are ongoing. Our purpose through this series of webinars has been to present timelines and actions, to tell the story in as much relevant detail as possible, to allow the audience to decide, using their own experience and training, what may have been done better. It is a major incident, and learning should follow. I suspect that as none of us were there, or our speaker was very much there, but I suspect that as most of us weren't there, having to juggle conflicting priorities, working against the clock, lacking full information, we do not know the pressure involved in making decisions and taking action, no doubt at the time, in the best interests of health, safety, and the environment. So let's reflect back at the Wakashio, a modern bulk carrier, 299 meters long, nearly 50 meters wide, an impressive vessel. In the last 6 months, she was, as a bulk carrier, she was moving product between Northern Australia back into China, and then she set out from China in June 29th, in the 3rd of July, refueled in Singapore, stopped there just for 18 hours, and then ended up in Mauritius, unfortunately, on the 25th of July. She was being routed really to Brazil to start a next series of work, and then she was contracted to do a series of jobs in Brazil. She obviously never got there. Now, the routing for the last 36 hours, she entered Mauritian waters on the 23rd of July at 11:42, and then basically she ended up on the reef where her stern now sits, and from what the AIS readings say and the data that you've seen, there was no real reduction in speed until she hit the reef. So she actually ran aground at 19:15 hours on the 25th of July. It was late in the day, but the crew should have been able to see what was going on, where they were, and had there been sufficient situational awareness, they would have probably seen the waters breaking on the reef itself. And there she sat. There's lots of questions which will come out of this, and some of the questions being asked now are, and a lot of questions have been raised in the media, not always questions that are necessarily relevant. But why did the vessel change course to pass so close to the island in daylight, in moderate seas, and not route further south? What contact was there between the vessel and the shore during the last 36 hours when she was so obviously off track and closing into Mauritius waters? Who authorised the various course changes as she approached the shallow waters by the island? And in particular, why did she go so close to the reef? So what happened? She grounded. The Coast Guard visited the vessel on the 26th of July. COVID testing was done. The Coast Guard agreed with the ship that as the vessel was not in immediate danger, that they could stay on board. Smith Salvage were appointed by the ship owner as the salvage contractor, with Solero as a local contact and responsible for offloading the oil, the bunker fuel on the vessel. On the 28th of July, the Mauritian Minister of Environment issued a statement basically saying that we're aware it's there and that we've appointed and that the owner has appointed a salvage contractor, and that was that. But the first serious vessel on scene was the Stanford Hawk, albeit not one that's large enough to tow the vessel off the reef. And on the 31st of July, the Smith team went on board the vessel to inspect the vessel and assess the damage. And at their point, they were confident that it could be salvaged. Now, this is the situation as at the 1st of August. You can now see that in the 6 days between grounding and grounding on the reef and the weather which came thereafter, she's moved some sort of 500 meters around the reef, and she's now virtually her stern is now attaching itself to the reef itself. The questions to be asked in these golden hours after the incident occurred was what attempt was made to stabilize the vessel, keeping the bow onto the reef during the heavy weather which then followed. What attempts were made during those days to remove fuel from the lower fuel tanks on board to other compartments on the vessel that were less vulnerable to pounding on the reef? What was happening on shore, and was any preparation undertaken in case of in the event that a spillage may occur? And was the maritime pollution response plan really rolled into action to protect any vulnerable sites? Now, on the 6th of August, the first oil started to leak from the Wakashio, and you can see in this slide with the red graphic where the fuel started to flow. What was the government reaction? Well, on the 7th of August, the Prime Minister declared a state of environmental emergency and requested French help, and that was done on the morning of the 7th of August. And the shoreline response stockpile was mobilized from Reunion and arrived on the island on the 8th of August. And of course, that's when all the environmental issues started, and I'm sure Costas will refer to those in his talk in a minute. The oil, the fuel coming from the bunker fuel, which was low sulfur fuel oil, spread very quickly and ended up contaminating over 35 kilometers of shoreline. Now, on 16 days after grounding, by then the weather had settled, and they were in a position to have a salvage vessel, the Stanford Hawk, accompanying 2 tankers, and you can see them both there, one of which is alongside recovering oil, and you can see that in here. And that was the first opportunity, apparently, that they could get a vessel safely alongside to actually decant oil. And the IBCs on the deck are there. You can see that attempts were made by the crew to pump fuel from their lower bunker tanks into IBCs, which were held on deck. And some of these were moved off by helicopter, and some of these were obviously offloaded onto the tankers which came alongside. On the 10th of August, the Prime Minister tells the nation that the Wakashio is likely to break up, and the worst case scenario is likely to happen as the boat will fall apart. And on the 11th of August, the oil spread further as the hull started to open up. And you will recall the pictures of the cracks down the side of the hull, and it was fairly obvious that the salvage was definitely not an option. But on the 12th of August, the Smith Salvage announced that oil pumping operations were complete. And the same day, some representatives from the French shoreline cleanup contractor, La Flotte de Pollution, contracted by the Japanese owner, arrived on site. It's important to note that Polyeco Mauritius were on site and were already working, and Costas will come and talk about that. And you can see the evidence here just of how much she is starting to break up. So on the 15th of August, the Mauritius National Crisis Committee issued a statement that around 4:30 p.m. a major detachment of the vessel's forward section was observed. It is estimated that a further 90 tons of fuel were still on board at the time of the separation, and some of that clearly obviously leaked away, and the bow was taken under tow once it broke up. And there's the bow, which is under tow to be taken off and disposed of. By the 15th of August, you'll see that that's where the pollution had spread to. You'll notice, in the bottom left-hand corner of the slide, that the Blue Bay Marine Park had not been impacted at all, and we'll come on to talk about that. But significantly, the island, which is directly downwind of the Wakashio's position, which is shown and highlighted, I mean, that was beginning to be affected, and there was great concern about the wildlife which is there and the effect that would have. But you can see that the impact quite quickly, well, there was quite a significant impact quite quickly. The bow section was then sunk at sea, and I know that this is a note of some controversy. The question would be asked, what were the alternatives? But on the 26th of August, we're perhaps starting to see an environmental impact. We don't really know whether the two incidents are related, but certainly on the 26th of August, 18 dolphins and whales were washed up dead on Mauritian shores. And by the 28th of August, this had increased to 39. And obviously, pictures like this and pollution impact, they get worldwide headlines. And this incident had already attracted a lot of headlines. And then most sadly, on the 31st of August, the first deaths related to the incident were involved. And this was when the tug Sagate and Duval, seen in this slide on the right, was towing a barge. When it collided with the barge that it was towing, the vessel overturned, and in all, 6 lives were lost. The question was, why was it routed to the east of the island and not to the west, when the west was the one that was taking the weather? Now, by now, there was real worldwide focus on it, and I think there are a lot of NGOs on the island, and Costas will talk about that, and the pollution plan was beginning to be, a cleanup plan was beginning to be affected. The Panama Maritime Authority, to which the Wakashio was registered, were on site and had conducted an initial investigation, and their report was very critical of the level of seamanship in the hours leading to the grounding. The vessel deviated from its approved navigation plan, and the captain authorized the approach close to the shore to gain telephone and internet signal. And he, the first officer, and the chief engineer on the bridge at the time. And we'll come on a little bit more to further comment on that after Costas's presentation. The question a lot of people have asked is where was the capability, and I've listed out some of what was funded by external bodies to providing a marine response capability on the island. The issue with Wakashio, as the Wakashio incident, from its grounding, the lack of initial response, then the the pollution incident, and then the breakup of it and the sinking of the bow section, it created a lot of media. Not all the media was well informed, and there were a lot of myths floating around. And we have to separate fact from fiction. So the belief out there was that it was a tanker, that it was a deliberate grounding, that no action whatsoever had been taken. Yes, that the COVID delayed response, there were delayed actions in the delayed activation of the oil spill response plan, and the ship started to spill oil, and the government was caught unprepared. But actually, the facts were, it was a bulk carrier, not a tanker. It falls under different regulations for that, and there's different protection for it in law. It was probably an accident. Even now, we can say nobody intended to stick the vessel on the reef. It was therefore probably human error, but we have to question that. The abandonment of the vessel was considered. The owners did very quickly sign a response contract to deal with it. The salvor was mobilized, and Smith Salvage had been on board the vessel, as we've previously reported. COVID was a nuisance, and it was particularly a nuisance for those who are arriving in the island, because obviously the Mauritian government wanted to protect from an increase in COVID on the island. Their response plan had been activated, but under the plan, the rigidity of the plan said that unless there was 1,000 tons discharged, then the plan couldn't be activated. The salvors had arrived and had inspected the vessel. The ship crew, when it was at the appropriate time, were evacuated. Oil removal had begun, but actually by then the hull was starting to crack and further oil was lost. In talking about routing, and there was lots of talk in some of the journals about its change of course midway across the Indian Ocean, but as you can see, this is not an uncommon occurrence. And in terms of the response, the issue is, on the island, they had booms in Port Louis for harbour spills. The government booms, the stockpile, were laid closest to the vessel in the sensitive sites, while improvised booms were used elsewhere. And there has been a lot of focus on the use of improvised bagasse booms, and I know that these caused quite a lot of issue in terms of waste management and all the rest of it, but they were suggested and they were part of the contingency plan. There was equipment delivered from other countries, albeit after the vessel had started to break up. And actually, this was actually the deployment of booms and skimmers when the vessel prior to the vessel discharging its load. And you can see that with the resources that they had available, there was a concentration on resource around the Blue Bay Marine Park, and possibly more was put there than was necessary, but it is a question of environmental priorities and environmental protection. But there were booms deployed, some 3,000 meters of them, over 3.5 or 3,400 meters of them, and there were skimmers deployed, and of course, one could always have more in incidents. And that's really where they were put, and you can see that there was quite a lot put around the Blue Bay Marine Park. Now, in hindsight, perhaps one could question that because it wasn't downwind, but it was the downwind areas that were affected. But that's really just presenting to you with the information. And this gives you a feel of some of the deployments, and you can see the Wakashio in the top right-hand corner. And this is particularly in the area around the Blue Bay Marine Park. So you've heard enough from me. I'd really like to introduce Kostas Chatsaglou. Sorry, Kostas, I'm not very good at that. I did try to practice it, but I've cocked it up. Kostas is a chemical engineer by qualification. He's the country manager in Mauritius, and he's really kindly agreed to talk. Now, Polyeco are going to do 2 talks. This is the first, the initial bit, the initial response, the initial cleanup, some thoughts on it, but also we'll be doing another one in March, which will cover the more detailed cleanup. So I'm going to unshare now. I'm going to then hopefully Kostas will be able to share, and we'll get a great presentation. So Kostas, welcome.
Thank you, Mark. I would like first to thank UK and Ireland Spill Association for the invitation. We are very, very happy that we are here today with you to share our experience from the Wakashio project. I don't know if you can see also my screen right now.
Yeah, it's good, Kostas, that's fine.
Okay, good. Let's start then. Give me 1 minute. Yes. So today, this is the first of the 2 webinars that Polyeco will participate. Today we will have a small introduction of our company. We will talk for the initial issues to overcome when the spill take place in Mauritius, about the mobilization of the labor force, the local labor force that took place, the waste management issues, the disposal of the contaminated artisanal goods that have been made from the volunteers and the NGOs during the oil spill, the protection of the uninfected areas, and the water quality analysis that took place from the authorities. Okay, there will be a second session with my colleague Nikos Vlachos, incident commander of Polyeco here in the incident of Wakashio MV, that you will talk about the cleaning techniques on sensitive areas like mangroves, how the government set the targets of cleanliness, and how the low sulfur fuel oil was behaved during this oil spill. I think this was the first oil spill with low sulfur fuel oil that we had, and about the contingency planning and the improvements that will take place. All this will be discussed with Nikos in the next webinar. So a small introduction about our company. Polyeco was established in 1977 by Mr. Ioannis Polychronopoulos in Greece. Then the mother company was Environmental Engineering Protection, EPE, in 1977, and was offering environmental services and marine pollution control services. In 2001, Polyeco was founded from EPE in order to cover the need for the hazardous waste management. After 40 years that we expand our services abroad, in 2017, Polyeco was established in Mauritius for the operation and the management of the interim storage facility of hazardous waste in Mauritius. Here you can see the group of companies of Polyeco. It's Polyeco, EPE, the mother companies, Polygreen, the company that has all the activities abroad, outside Greece. First, it's the company that provides water ballast treatment solutions for vessels. Our systems are approved from US Coast Guard and from IMO. And the other companies are waste management companies and oil spill companies of our group that has to do with the management of waste and oil spill response companies. Polyeco has an experience and a long track record with international projects from World Bank, Food Agricultural Organization, and had undertaken more than 100 waste management projects in 20 countries the last years. Here you can see, let's say, some of our projects worldwide and some of our bases where we have where they took place the last years. We were the first integrated waste management company in Greece, and it was developed under a unique program then from universities and the private sector and cement industry. So the services that we mainly provide our group, it's waste management and environmental services, oil and HNS spill response services, and circular economy solutions. More specifically, we are providing hazardous waste management, decontamination and remediation of contaminated sites, survey and inspection of hazardous and non-hazardous cargoes, production of alternative fuel from solid and liquid hazardous waste, and hazmat incident response services. Also, we are providing oil spill and HNS response services, provision for emergency response equipment, IHM and asbestos management, ballast water treatment, as I said before, and wastewater treatment solutions for vessels. Polyeco in Mauritius. Polyeco in Mauritius, as I said, it was established in 2017 for the management of the interim hazardous storage facility, and we were present since the first days of the grounding of Wakashio. Initially, it was appointed as an environmental arm for the initial investigation during the grounding of the vessel. Later on, the authorities requested from Polyeco to have on standby for transportation in Mauritius oil spill equipment for Tier 1 and Tier 3 incidents. And later, Polyeco was appointed along with another company, Le Floc de Pollution, for the shoreline cleanup. And it was awarded to Polyeco, the hazardous waste management. And now we are providing oil spill services during the wreck removal of the aft part of the Wakashio wreck, and the scrap decontamination for the scrap that will come out from the wreck removal. Let's go to our presentation now. Initial issues to overcome. When the incident took place, the first issues that we have to do, it was the coordination with the authorities and all the relevant parties. Initially, before the spill, responsible authority in Mauritius was the shipping division for the wreck, and after the spill, the responsible authority was the Ministry of Environment. Ministry of Environment is responsible when we have a spill. Ministry of Shipping Division is responsible when we have a grounding of a vessel. At the same time, in the beginning, there should be a coordination with all the parties, because as Mark said, the company was in an environmental emergency status. So it was requested from the government, all the private companies that are willing in the first days after the spill took place to assist, provide equipment and personnel to come in contact with them. Imagine that in the first days I was receiving calls from people I have never heard, I have never known, asking me how we can help, what we can do, and I was sending them to the ministries, because then there should be a coordination. Also, the second issue we had at that time, it was COVID restrictions. Mauritius has closed borders. At that time, it was only some flights that were coming to Mauritius, and if you had to mobilize personnel, equipment, and experts to come, they have to go through quarantine and according to the COVID protocols here. At that time, someone that should come in Mauritius should be staying in a hotel in quarantine without having any contacts with people outside for 14 days. So you understand that it was not easy, let's say, for someone, even from the first days of the wreck, to be landed in Mauritius. Also, there were not so many flights, so the only way to come there was with a chartered flight through Réunion. So someone had to fly through Réunion, that it's an island 1 hour distance with a plane from Mauritius, and then to charter flight and come here. Experience and trained personnel. Polyeco, as from 2018, has established in Mauritius an oil spill base. This was an idea of the owner of Polyeco, Mr. Athanasios Polychronopoulos. He would like to have an oil spill base as the company was here. Polyeco had trained personnel, first responders and non-scene commanders according to IMO standards, but we cannot say the same thing that there was a lot of people trained, except the Coast Guard, okay, that they had some equipment. Equipment capacity and supply chain was another issue. Due to COVID restrictions, as we understand, it was not easy to have equipment here, but also there was equipment, because during Mark's presentation there was some, let's say, rumors and reality. What it is here, we can say that yes, there were oil booms in Mauritius. Coast Guard had their oil booms. Oil companies that are located in Port Louis and the Mauritius Port Authority had equipment. Okay, and this finally was mobilized to come here in order to be used for the incident. But also more equipment were needed, and you know, the supply chain, let's say, it was not so easy. If you want to ship something to Mauritius, let's say, by a vessel with a container, you will need approximately 40 to 45 days from Europe to come to Mauritius. You will need at least 2 weeks to come from China or from India. Imagine that with COVID restrictions, when the routes of the vessels are changing, you could have significant delays. Also, after the incident with Sir Gaitan Tag of the Mauritius Port Authority, at that time, some vessels was not able to call at Mauritius port, so they bypass the port, and imagine that we have delays up to 2 or 3 weeks to receive equipment. When we are admitting, let's say, absorbents at that time that we have shipped from Europe to come to Mauritius according to our schedule, the vessel that were carrying the containers with the absorbent bypassed Mauritius because we couldn't call to the port, and we received this 15 days later. That had, as a result, a lot of supplies come here by aircrafts. NGOs and volunteers. People initially, when the spill happened, was mobilized, and they took the initiatives in order to start collecting the oil from the shore and the sea, and by creating the artisanal booms and place it all around the affected areas in order to protect it. The artisanal booms, it will be a part of our presentation later, and we will be see that in detail, what was the issues during the management of these booms later, the one from the bagasse, from the straws. And a last issue to overcome it was the reactions of the resident and the public. People were frustrated. Imagine that Mauritius is a country, and Blue Bay and Myburg, that lives on tourism. These people, by seeing the sea polluted by oil in their area, if they had, let's say, fishermen mostly and skippers that they are occupied in the touristic sector, they saw, let's say, they were not able to work at that time. The sea area was closed also by the oil. So you understand what was the reactions. I believe you see also the protests that took place from the public later in Mauritius. So, as I said, Polyeco later was appointed along with Le Floc de Pollution in order to do the shoreline cleanup. And then we had to mobilize also, except of the personnel that we mobilized as Polyeco, also the local labor force. From Polyeco, we were approximately 20 people here from abroad, and all the rest were local people that they have been trained and mobilized by Polyeco. More than 250 locals were appointed in order to assist in the operations. These people were fishermen, skipper, divers, and some other people from the area of the incident. Initially, fishermen were appointed by Polyeco in order to assist us to collect the artisanal booms from the sea, the contaminated artisanal booms. We had the information from the fisheries division, where they give us all the registered fishermen that were affected by the oil spill in the area of Myburg and Blue Bay, in order to be in contact with them and assist them, to hire them to assist us. Also, Polyeco established a list on where we had our headquarters on site at Point Desnis, that people were coming every day in order to be hired. Imagine that more than 400 or 500 people passed from there, and every day we are coming. Unfortunately, we couldn't hire them all, but we had tried to give a priority, let's say, to the local people that they are from the area. Also, boats and trucks were subcontracted from the local people of the area in order to assist them. So, for these people that they were hired from Polyeco, and they have to be trained for the equipment that they will use, how they will do the operations, and a risk assessment from our health and safety officers should take place. Also, they had a health and safety training on how to use their PPE and all the other equipment. In a daily basis, it was taking place a meeting with the authorities in order to do the schedule of discuss our schedule of operations. And after that, our people, they were taking instructions in order to have a toolbox talk with their teams in each site that they will have to work, and explain to them what works have to take place and how this will take place. Also, we had to establish a health and safety committee in which were participating people from the company and representatives of the people that work for the company. And we had regular inspections from the Ministry of Labour in order to supervise the situation, the PPEs that we provide to the people, if we provide them facilities on site, let's say fresh water, towels, and facilities to have their lunch. So we will pass now to the hazardous waste management. As I told you, Polyeco is operating the interim storage facility, which is the only licensed facility in Mauritius for the storage of hazardous waste. Mauritius does not have a facility for solid hazardous waste to be disposed locally. They don't produce significant quantities, so the government took a decision 5 years ago to establish a facility for storage in order to see what quantities are generated and how this will produce. For oily waste, liquid oil waste, there is 2 recycling companies right now in Mauritius that they received all the liquid oils to their premises. This facility is located at La Sumière Bamboos in a distance approximately 52 kilometers from the place that the incident took place. It has an administration and a laboratory where analysis of the waste is taking place in-house, a repacking building of 450 square meters, and a storage capacity of 4,400 square meters. The facility right now has a capacity to store approximately 3,000 tons of waste. It has, as I told you, 3 buildings. Each one has been used for a different way before, but right now, out of the 10 compartments that we have in these buildings, 7 of these have been used for the Wakashio. You can see some pictures, let's say, of how the waste are stored right now and repacked inside the facility. The services that Polyeco was appointed to provide according to for the waste management of Wakashio was sorting and regrouping of the hazardous waste, repacking of these and labeled according to IMDG and ADR specifications for the transshipment of this, the safe storage till the exportation from the Mauritius to OECD countries, exportation and shipment, and final disposal of the waste. The types of waste that was generated during the incident, it was oily sludge. We had contaminated absorbents that have been used during the operations to collect the oil, empty contaminated packing material like drums and IBCs, contaminated solid, other contaminated materials like the booms and other debris that had to be collected from the sea. Let's say when the spill happened and the oil went to the shore, nearby the shore there was a lot of debris. These were contaminated from oil, and these, according to the Mauritian legislation, are considered as hazardous waste, which have been exported because there are not local facilities, let's say, to be disposed here. And also there was other hazardous waste that has been removed from Wakashio, like paint and thinners from Smith, and these have been also delivered to the facility for further disposal and management. Here is how the sorting, the repacking, and the labeling of waste took place. Oily sludge with humidity is repacked to IBCs, IBC container, and metal closed drums. Oily sludge solid without humidity, this goes to plastic bags and big bags, FIBCs, flexible intermediate bulk containers. Empty drums and other packing material that were contaminated would not be cleaned. These have been crushed in order to reduce the volume, and also we put it inside the flexible intermediate bulk containers. And all the other solids also was also in FIBCs. In case that we have seen a leakage, let's say, to any packing material, this had to be repacked again with an overpack or an overdrum in order to be safe stored during the transportation. Here in the first picture, you can see some drums, how this has been received in the first and the second picture in the facility in the first days, and in the third picture down, you can see how this has been later repacked prior to the exportation. Till 11th of January, that the shoreline cleaning operations finished, it has been delivered to the interim storage facility 2,714 tons of hazardous waste. This was approximately 4,045 big bags of 1 cubic meter, 241 IBCs of 1 cubic meter, and 5,100 drums of 200 liters. You can see we had to mobilize additional resources at that time until now in order to complete the whole repacking process. Normally, the facility was operating with a personnel of 15 to 20 people. Right now, sometimes we had approximately 60 to 70 people at some times. Also, we had to mobilize, let's say, more equipment, like 5 forklifts, 1 bobcat, 2 crane trucks in order to unload the trucks that were coming daily to the facility. For the first month, during August, imagine that we are receiving, there were days that we are receiving approximately 10 trucks per day, which have to be unloaded, segregate the waste and store it at the same time. The exportation of the hazardous waste, according to the instructions of the authorities, will have to take place to OECD countries. This is a procedure that is taking place according to the Basel Convention, and Polyeco had submitted applications which have been approved recently, last Friday, and now we can perform the exportation since October. In order to take place the shipment of the waste, we need to have the consent from all the transit countries and the country of delivery. So, as you will see later, this is a procedure that takes a long time. Let's say, if we would like to export the waste from Port Louis to Europe by container vessels, the commercial route that the vessel has to follow is from Port Louis to Sri Lanka, then to Oman, to Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Turkey, and then we'll go to Italy and Greece, because the waste will be exported to our facilities in Greece as we will see later. So we need to take the approval from all these countries. This is a procedure that takes approximately 3 months. This was before COVID period. Now with COVID, that also some authorities in some countries have restrictions on their operation, this could take much more time. When we submit our applications for the exportations of the waste on October, on December, we informed from the shipping company that due to COVID, there is changes in the routes, so we'll have to submit the new applications for container vessels, which will go from Port Louis through South Africa to Spain, London, Rotterdam, and then, let's say, to Greece. So you imagine that this is causing delays also to the shipment of the waste. So one other option that we had, it was to have a chartered vessel specific for the exportation of this waste, and we submit another application that a vessel will go through Suez Canal straight to Greece to deliver the waste. This is a procedure that takes significantly less time, and the trip only will have a duration of 15 days. And also to take the approval took us 3 months, as we are estimating, 3 to 4 months. Imagine that for the other routes, we don't have an approval yet by container. And here I have to highlight the fact that Mauritius had a facility licensed that can accept this waste. Imagine what will happen if we didn't have a facility that could store and store, sort and store all this for a period of 4 or 5 months. Here you can see, let's say, some indicative pictures from other operations that we have shipped quantities in bulk like this. These pictures are from an exportation that took place recently from another project in Dubai, where we shipped by vessel approximately 3,000 tons of hazardous waste in the same way. And as we said, this waste will be disposed at Polyeco's facilities in Greece, which are licensed for productions of alternative solid fuel and alternative raw material for cement industries from hazardous waste. We have a capacity there of 40,000 tons per year. It's licensed, the facility, for incoming materials and waste. So can accept easily the volume that was generated from Wakashio. The waste that will be disposed at Polyeco's facility, as I said, it will be transformed to alternative solid fuel and to alternative raw material. Oily sludge, all the contaminated material, the absorbents, the plastic, will be used for the production of alternative solid fuel, and all the contaminated soil will be used for the production of alternative raw material for cement industries. The time frame that we have, it was not the initial time frame, it is how this adjusted during the time. It was, let's say that the cleanup operations will be finished by 25th of January. Polyeco complete the cleanup by 31st of December. Le Floc de Pollution, they finished by 9th of January, if I'm not wrong, if I'm not mistaken. And the collection of the waste finished at 11th of January. We received the last shipment of waste at the facility at 11th of January. We have the approvals for the license for the exportation on 19th of February. And we are expecting to finish the repacking of all the quantities to be ready for shipment by mid of March. From mid of March till end of March, the waste will be shipped and the final disposal will take place by June. This is regarding hazardous waste. One other issue that we had, it was the artisanal booms. It was requested from Polyeco to collect all the artisanal booms that were contaminated from the sea. It was these booms that were manufactured and deployed from the NGOs and all the volunteers during the first days of the incident. At that time, we mobilized initially there the local fishermen with their boats in order to assist us to collect all this from the sea. And we set up, according to our plan, 5 places for the disembarkation of this. These were at Point Jérôme, at Maïbourg waterfront, at Vieux Grand Port, Bois d'Amuret, and Bambou Virou. You can see it better here in this map. All over the lagoon and all over this place were placed artisanal booms from the volunteers in order to protect the coastline during the spillage, and this later had to be removed. So initially our operation was scheduled to have, let's say, 5 sites, as we said, 10 boats with 3 persons in each site to coordinate these boats, and to work in 2 sites per day with an estimated rate of 2 kilometers per day that will be collected. And we estimate that it will last approximately 20 days, according to the weather restrictions. The disposal of this, when this will have been collected, the first quantities have been delivered to the interim storage facility, but due to the high volume, the government decided that this will be transferred to another place, to La Lura waste transfer station. It's a transfer station nearby the place of the incident, and where these are stored. At that place, they have to segregate the straws from all the other plastic materials, fishing nets, ropes, bottles or jerrycans that used in order to assist the booms to be floating. All these have been contaminated. All these have to be segregated. All the plastic materials have been delivered to the facility, the ones that have been contaminated, to dispose as hazardous waste. The contaminated straws it was instructed by the government to be delivered to the independent power producers for energy recovery. These facilities are licensed to incinerate bagasse in Mauritius in order to produce energy. The issue that we had, although it was that because of the high humidity, more than 70%, this was not acceptable for incineration from these facilities. So we have to let this to dry and then to be disposed. That has, as a result, during the long storage period, and according to fermentation that take place, this to take fire sometimes where it was stored. So the quantity of this has been reduced a little bit from the fire, but still the disposal has not taken place, and we are waiting to reduce the humidity from this. Some indicative pictures here you can see from these operations. You see that the fishermen with their boats, they were collecting the artisanal booms, and afterwards these were transported by a crane to tipper trucks in order to be transported to the place that will be segregated and disposed. You can see the length and the volume of this. Yes. Here is the collection that was taking place by the fishermen also. So finally, instead of 10 boats, we use approximately 20 boats for this collection and 62 fishermen. Instead of 20 days, it took us 12 days with the help of the local fishermen to collect all this, and we are collected approximately 56 kilometers in a total quantity of 340 tons of artisanal booms. It was a big quantity. Protection of unaffected areas. There were some areas that they didn't affect from the oil spill. Mostly the inner part of the rivers that were coming out to the lagoon area, and the Ramsar areas nearby the lagoon. So in order to protect these areas, till the last days of the cleaning operations, we were instructed from the authorities to place booms to the mouths of these rivers, as you can see, in order to avoid any oil debris from the flushing and the flooding that were taking place during the cleaning, if these are not collected, let's say, during these operations, or from the weather, to be protected and collect everything that will go to these areas. These booms have been removed after the completion of the cleaning operations of the shore. Finally, for the water quality analysis, the authorities had prepared the sampling plan from where they were collecting from the lagoon area seawater, sediments, and fish samples in a regular basis in order to analyze this. The authorities that were responsible for this operation was Albion Fisheries Research Center, the Fisheries Division of the Ministry of Blue Economy, and the Mauritius Oceanographic Institute. The parameters that they were analyzing in this, it was total hydrocarbons and polyaromatic hydrocarbons and heavy metals for the seawater and the sediment samples, and heavy metals and the total hydrocarbons and polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons for the fish samples. The analysis for the fish samples was taking place according to the local regulations for food. Finally, Ilo Egret Island, which is a protected area inside the lagoon, and the Blue Bay Marine Park, after the analysis, this analysis result was decided to be reopened for recreational activities and for the visitors for the Great Island as from 12th of December, and we'll start operating again. This is a map from the initial pattern of sampling, which were taking place in the beginning from the authorities. As you can see, this is from a presentation of Mauritius Oceanographic Institute. And somewhere here, my presentation will find it's finished. Thank you for your time. If you have any questions, we are at your disposal.
Right, thank you very much, Kostas. That's grand. If you unshare, I'll then share mine again. We have had a number of questions which have come in on the chat, and what I will do is I'll be pulling those together at the end. So Kostas, if you can just unshare, that's great. I'll share mine. Okay, Kostas, thank you very much for that. We've had about half a dozen questions, but we'll take those a bit later on. So the current situation is that the stern is still where it is. And these are some of the issues which are going to cause a problem in predicting how long the stern is going to take, because it's sat right on the reef. It's actually it's very, very vulnerable to the weather, and this is not an untypical view. However, there is a monster crane which is in place, which has been on site for, well, it's been in Mauritius for about a week or so. It's been built and it's out there, and it's going to be used by the team which is contracted to remove it. Apparently their task should be completed within 2 months, but that's weather dependent, and I believe that there is some optimism that it may be quicker than that. And throughout all of this, Polyeco have reboomed the Blue Bay Marine Park, and they're providing booming and support to this wreck removal operation. So that's great. I mean, the legal case, I mean, you may have caught up with it, but the captain and first officer were charged with unlawful interference with the operation of a property of a ship likely to endanger its safe navigation. Because there was a reasonably high risk that they would leave the country, bail was refused. A second bail application was refused on the 20th of October. Their recent reappearance prompted a degree of finger pointing between the captain and the chief officer. The chief said the captain had instructed them to go close to the shore for cell phone signal provided, and this has been proved by the data recorder. The captain admitted going to a crew party and drinking, but said that he had issues with the course correction made by the chief officer on his return. The chief said that the captain was in the pilot's chair using his phone when they ran aground. And also significantly, they reported in this court appearance that the ballast pumps were not working, and so it inhibited the ability to move ballast around the vessel, which could have assisted its refloating. It's not a happy picture. The compensation, I mean, you may have caught up on this at a previous webinar, but effectively, Mitsui OSK Lines have said that they will spend about $9.4 million on measures to help Mauritius, including the cleanup of the island's mangrove forests and a contribution to an ongoing environmental recovery fund. Unfortunately, in law, the Mauritius has only ratified the 1976 version, which restricts payments to a maximum of $18.7 million, while in fact Japan has signed the 1996 version of the Bunker Convention, I believe it is, which has an upper limit of 7 billion, which is significantly higher than the 2 billion yen that they've agreed that they're committed to. However, the Wakashio is insured by the Japanese P&I Club, and they basically they could cover up to $1 billion of costs. However, of course, none of this has been agreed. And I think the local Mauritians are hoping that there will be a generous compensation to them for their loss. It has to be said that the island, because of COVID, was pretty well closed down and has been closed down for a lot of the incident because of COVID. And so the effect on tourism and the tourist economy would have been significantly reduced because of COVID anyway. However, these are the sorts of things which they will be fighting over now. But it's no doubt that this incident has had a significant effect on Mauritius. It is interesting how the socio-political effect of Mauritius, of this spill, has been significant. You know, in late August, we saw, well, on worldwide news, protests by Mauritians in Mauritius, and these went on for several weeks since. There were also protests abroad about the performance of the government. It is clear, and you saw in Kostas's presentation, there were over 50 kilometers of artisanal booms, which were basically built by local people to protect what they felt were their local communities. I mean, 50 kilometers of effort going into to do that. And there's no doubt the artisanal booms, whilst they proved very difficult to recover, did provide a degree of protection. Many of those were made by local people volunteering at weekends, including some who even volunteering their hair. They wouldn't have got a lot off me. But I think the public felt let down by the government's handling of COVID, their handling of the Wakashio incident, their lack of communication and leadership within the incident. But there is concerns how the government, as all governments have struggled to handle the effects of COVID on the economy, and at times a lack of effective leadership throughout the tough times that the country is in. So the public have expressed a sense of outrage against the government, and some of the failings which the government have seen have been pinned. They are claiming that some of the failings of the government in the handling of incidents like the Wakashio have affected their perception of the government's ability. It has also affected their international reputation, and that has been discouraging inward investment into the country. So you can't ignore the political fallout from incidents like this. We would love to talk to the Minister of the Environment about it. So in a sense, this story is far from over. There's many questions which remain unanswered, and some of these are beginning to creep out through the court case. Why did she strike a reef so close to shore? And why was she so far off course? Even if they wanted to get mobile phone signal, did they really have to go so close to a well-known reef? Why was the vessel not attended to sooner? And why could the loss of oil not have been contained closer to the source earlier? Why was the spill response relatively disjointed and relatively slow? What will be the bill and who will pay? And how long will it take the marine environment to recover? Now it's clear, and we'll cover a couple of these points in the questions which arise. Fortunately for the local Mauritians, through the efforts of Polyeco and the response that there has been, life is turning to something more normal. Areas are open for tourism, and importantly for fishing. So questions. I have had a string of questions. So Kostas, if you would like to unmute, it would be great. So Kostas, I've had a number of questions. One was, can you confirm that the oil from the mangroves and the beaches have now been removed? And I think that will probably be a yes.
You will discuss this also in the next webinar with my colleague Nikos. Yeah. But what I confirm to you is that a joint inspection of all the sites took place with the government authorities and also their technical advisors. As a technical advisor of the government was here at Cedre, and they confirmed the level of the cleanliness for all the affected areas.
Great. Okay.
But this we will discuss it in bigger detail with my colleague Nikos Vlachos in the next.
We will do. We will do. But in general terms, another question which has arisen: was there any chemical substances used to clean the oil?
Polyeco, and as far as I know, Le Flot de Pollution, not one of these two companies has used any chemicals, solvents, degreasing substances or anything else. All the cleaning operations took place with seawater during the flushing and the flooding. Yeah. But also this, Nikos will explain to you in the next in more details, as he was the incident commander for all these operations.
No, that's great. Thank you very much for that. I understand now that the fishermen are allowed back to all areas to fish. Is that right?
I have to see this to confirm it.
No,
the area right now, the area are open, as I said, for some activities.
Yes.
However, I think there is also a restriction now that because the wreck removal operations are taking place, and there is an area in front of the wreck that right now it's not allowed in the activities.
Okay.
Buoys have been placed, and the Coast Guard supervising this area at this moment.
Fine. One of the questions was, and you probably won't be able to answer this. I read that the oil from the Wakashio was not chemically fingerprinted, in other words, by the supplier, which is what is needed to ensure the oil was fully cleaned. Now, the first part of that, I can say that if it wasn't chemically fingerprinted, that would be a surprise. But that has been a statement which was in a G Captain, and I think that's been refuted by BP, who are the supplier of the oil in Singapore, apparently. But I do believe that the oil that it was carrying has been fully analysed by both in Mauritius, but also by independent laboratories in England and by CEDRA in France. And I think that would be, though it's not your area, would you sort of agree with that?
I cannot confirm because I'm not fully informed about the fingerprinting of the oil. So I don't want to say something that will not be 100% right now.
Yeah. Personally, we had a presentation, our last in Wakashio Part 2, we had 2 marine scientists who attended the presentation, and certainly the laboratories, the marine scientists from CFAS, which is part of the UK government support to this incident, confirmed that the oil had been chemically analysed, and it was chemically analysed in Mauritius at the oceanography laboratories and the public laboratories. And it was that data that they were using to pass to people who were involved in the cleanup. And the other question was, what risks are there for an oil spill from the stern of the Wakashio? Then I think the answer would be probably there is a risk, and that's why yourselves are involved in protecting against that risk. Would that be fair to say, Kostas?
What I can say is that it was requested as an extra measure from the insurance company and the companies that are responsible for the operations, Polyeco to be there and be on preparedness. From what I can confirm is that the oil has been pumped out from the tanks, so we are not expecting, let's say, a spill right now, a big spill like the previous time. It could be normal, some minor quantities to be inside the piping, but I don't expect something huge personally as Kostas as we are speaking right now. I don't believe that someone can predict, let's say, what it is the quantities, but it was requested also from the authorities, and also it was agreed by the ship owners' representatives, I think. And for this reason, Polyeco is still here to provide oil spill response services. But this is something also I believe it's better to discuss it with Nikos next time.
Yeah, we will indeed. But that's fine. Question, with a spill like this and with a limited amount of resource, particularly in booms and skimmers, was it necessary to identify any sacrificial areas to divert the oil from more sensitive areas during the operation?
Can you repeat the question, please?
Yeah. So was it there? Obviously, areas of the coastline were generally quite sensitive, but some are more sensitive than others, like the Ramsar areas. Was it necessary to divert oil from those areas into less environmentally sensitive areas?
Yes. First of all, initially when the grounding took place, the concern of the authorities was for the sensitive areas, like the Blue Bay Marine Park,
yeah,
which have been fully boomed around. The Ramsar side. Okay. When the spill took place at that time, it was affected the most of the areas.
mm.
So it was, I cannot say that we divert, let's say, to less sensitive, because it was that the current's direction that the oil spread, I believe, and the quantity of the oil, because when you have a spill of 1,000 tons, let's say, you understand, as many booms as you have in place, you cannot collect all this oil. So this will pass the booms, and it will, with the currents, diverted to the areas where finally went to Rivière de Creole, let's say, that was one of the most affected areas.
Okay, that's great. I mean, another question. Had a spill of this scale been used as an exercise before?
I didn't hear you well.
So I seem to be getting this. So let me just I'll put it on chat, but I'll put it on chat if you can look at that, because I'm just getting a lot of feedback. Oh no, the feedback's gone. Right. Had a spill of this scale been used as an exercise scenario to test capabilities prior to the event?
From whom to have, let's say, an exercise to this?
We're in part of the pollution.
Let's say we had a tier 3 incident. A tier 3, it's let's say the government. I cannot answer, let's say, on behalf of the government if they can visit a scenario. Mauritius, of course, had the national oil spill contingency plan.
Yeah, fine.
Yes, the authorities, as far as I know, from what I have discussed, let's say, with the National Coast Guard, they have a schedule of trainings. But I cannot answer, let's say, okay, if they had a tier 3. I'm not aware of it.
Okay. And for those, I mean, obviously quite a lot of people have been now exposed to the oil contamination. And is there a sort of health screening program going on for those people?
As far as I know, and I am informed, there is a health monitoring program from the government for the people living in the affected areas.
Yeah. And for
I haven't followed that.
And for those who worked with you on the spill, the 200 locals?
For these people, there is the health and safety procedures of our company, according to our integrated management system, that we are monitoring their health also, and we have results about them. Great,
thank you. Good. I'm just back into chat. Have a look. Right, I've got, okay. Okay, another question which has come in. Did Polyeco refer to the Mauritian oil spill contingency plan when deciding the initial cleanup response?
As far as I know, Polyeco, because this Polyeco is here since 2017. The Mauritius oil spill plan is under review right now. It was before Polyeco arrived here, so I don't think that we are included at that moment in Mauritian national oil spill contingency plan.
Okay, one of the questions, and you may not have the answer to this, but this has come in, I think. Although fishing has only been allowed off the lagoon, many coastal residents are fishing within the lagoon because of a well-known lack of fisheries enforcement along the Mauritian coastline. Is anything being publicly released about the sampling that has occurred within the sea for the fish that they are catching? So has there been any publicly released analysis of the samples taken from fish? It's not a Polyeco issue, but you live there.
I understand. I cannot have a comment on this.
Yeah, I think people need to talk to the Ministry of the Environment rather than the spill responder. It's a difficult question to answer. Okay, fine. Those are the questions. I don't think there's any more. I've just gone up and down chat, and that was that. That was great. Firstly, I'd like to thank you, Kostas, for your time today and the effort you've put into your presentation. We really appreciate it. I mean, publicly, as an observer of this, and probably a moderately educated observer, I think your communication throughout has been great. It's been wonderful to see so many local people being employed and getting work out of a most regrettable incident, which has understandably affected their lives and their prosperity. So I think that's been great. And the open communication by Polyeco through their LinkedIn page, their Facebook page and stuff like that has been great. So I think everybody would be very grateful. I feel reassured that you're so actively involved in the clearance and the spill protection with the wreck, with the stern removal. The stern is vital that the stern goes, because every day it's there, it's creating a plume of effectively debris from the reef, which is spreading across the lagoon and preventing the recovery of the marine environment there. So that's great. And I'm really delighted that Nikos will be able to come to the next webinar. We don't know exactly when that will be because he's directly involved in the wreck removal. But as soon as we know that date, we will cascade that information out to you. And it will be delightful to hear from him. So we've recorded this, complete with errors from me, not from you, but hopefully this will be available within the next 48 hours, hopefully less. And we will email everyone who's attended this webinar so that you can gain a link to it. It will also be on www.ukspill.org, which is our website. Now, so look out for part 4 of the Wakashio webinar. And obviously, as you know, alongside this, we've been doing our knowledge-based webinars, the next of which is on the 24th of March 21, and it'll be all about absorbents. And as you can see, a lot of absorbents are used in an oil spill. So I really thank you for joining. It's been great to have so many people visit. The recording will be available. And Kostas, thank you very much for your time, and we wish you well with the stern removal.
Thank you, Mark. It was a pleasure to have this invitation from the UK and Ireland Spill Association. And on behalf of my colleagues also, thank you. We were at your disposal for anything you need. Okay.
Great. And it's also actually, I think there's some local Mauritius people who've been attending and